over to you.
Thanks, Dana. This is a Fox News alert. Good evening. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. As people here in the nation's capital and all over the country finally get to see the just declassified memo alleging FBI abuses in surveillance practices, we have complete reporting and reaction. And as Dana mentioned, a live exclusive interview with House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, the man who put together the document and fought to release it. President Trump calls the findings in this memo a disgrace. Fellow Republicans say it shows high-level politicization of the justice process. Democrats and many in law enforcement say it is damaging, inaccurate, and out of context. We have Fox team coverage tonight. John Roberts is at the White House with what the administration is saying and doing about the memo. But we begin with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge here in Washington, the first journalist to get excerpts of the memo to tell us what's in it. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. The White House sent a letter to the House Intelligence Committee today confirming the president used his authority as commander-in-chief to fully declassify the records without changes or redactions. The memo paints a troubling picture. The newly declassified 4-page Republican staff memo makes the case that the secret National Security Court was kept in the dark by the FBI and Justice Department when they sought and secured a surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. The memo says the court was never told the former British spy, who was paid by Democrats to put together the Trump dossier, had a personal animus toward the presidential nominee. In September 2016, Christopher Steele admitted to Justice Department official Bruce Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he, quote, was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. Orr was recently demoted over his contacts with Steele and Glenn Simpson, whose opposition research firm Fusion GPS directed the Trump project. Bank records obtained by the House committee show Orr's wife Nellie worked for Fusion GPS and began investigating Trump as early as May 2016. Republican investigators said the court was also never told about the dossier's political roots. Neither the initial FISA application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party campaign in funding Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were then known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. According to the memo, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought without the Steele dossier information. McCabe was removed earlier this week. British court records show Fusion GPS directed Steele to quietly brief a half-dozen American media outlets in the fall of 2016, but the majority did not go with the story. But one who did was apparently used to justify FBI surveillance. The Carter Page FISA application also cited extensively a September 23, 2016 Yahoo News article by Michael Isikoff, which focuses on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. In a Fox interview last spring, Page denied working with the Russians.
I have never broken any law or done anything untoward in Russia or relating to any Russian person.
According to the memo, an FBI counterintelligence chief said the corroboration of the Steele dossier was in the early stages, even as the initial Page FISA application was submitted. Days before the inauguration, Comey later testified he told the president-elect at Trump Tower the dossier was, quote, salacious and unverified. But strikingly, the dossier was used repeatedly to renew the surveillance of Page by Comey, his deputy McCabe, then Obama Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, and later by Trump appointee Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. In the memo, Republicans raised the specter of legality over the handling of the Trump dossier and representations made to the FISA court. Today, the Attorney General sent a formal referral to the Inspector General for investigation. Brett.
All right, Catherine, thank you. The president says a lot of people should be ashamed of themselves. Clearly, many of his opponents are not. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has that part of the story tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. White House officials say the decision to release the memo was made by the president with input from his national security team, including law enforcement and intelligence officials. And while the White House praised the men and women of the FBI, it also pointed to what it called bad actors with a political bias against the president. Meeting in the Oval Office with North Korean defectors today, President Trump left no room for interpretation how he felt about the memo.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that.
Reaction to the document came in like a flood. Carter Page, the Trump volunteer at the center of the FISA memo, said in a statement, the brave and assiduous oversight by congressional leaders in discovering this unprecedented abusive process represents a giant historic leap in the repair of America's democracy. Former FBI Director James Comey, on the other hand, tweeted, "That's it? Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with intelligence community, damaged relationship with FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified investigation of an American citizen. For what? DOJ and FBI must keep doing their jobs." In a conference call, Adam Schiff, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, ripped the memo as blatant partisan politics.
This wasn't about oversight. This is about telling a political story that's helpful to the president. It's about telling a political story that's designed to injure the work of the special counsel and to discredit it.
Speaker of the House Paul Ryan said it was necessary to get the facts out in the light of day, in a statement saying that American civil liberties may have been violated and that he has serious concerns with the practice of using political documents funded by a candidate's political opponents to make law enforcement and counterintelligence decisions. A big question raised by the memo: what happens to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein? He oversees the special counsel investigation, but the memo reveals he signed one of the Pfizer surveillance applications against Page. In the Oval Office, President Trump was asked if he still has confidence in Rosenstein.
Do you still have confidence in him after reading the memo?
You figure that one out.
Amid accusations of a partisan smear of the FBI, the White House said they would be happy to hear opposing arguments. The press secretary saying in a statement, minority members of the committee have reportedly drafted a separate memorandum. The administration stands ready to work with Congress to accommodate oversight requests consistent with applicable standards, including the need to protect intelligence sources and methods. The president's comments in the Oval Office about Rosenstein left some ambiguity as to exactly where he stands, so White House officials were quick to clarify that there has been no conversation and no consideration about firing Rosenstein. Brett?
John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Let's get the inside story on the memo from the man in charge. Devin Nunes is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee that released this document. Mr. Chairman, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Brett.
What do you think the biggest takeaway from this memo is in your eyes?
Well, I'm sad that we had to get to this point. We should have never been here. It's unfortunate. I didn't want to have to do this. But the sad part is that I have an obligation to the American people when we see FISA abuse, so these are secret courts that exist, to target for foreigners, for catching terrorists, for catching people who might be bad actors. And the American citizens that are represented before this court have to be protected. And the only place that can protect them is the U.S. Congress when abuses do occur.
Did you write the memo?
So it's not a place we wanted to go. It's not a place we wanted to go, but it's where we had to go.
Did you write it?
Myself, Trey Gowdy, our two investigators, and then obviously checked by the lawyers and the rest of our committee members.
Did you read the actual FISA applications?
No, I didn't. And this has been one of these bogus news stories that have been put out. So the agreement we made with the Department of Justice was to create a reading room and allow one member and two investigators to go over and review the documents. I thought the best person on our committee would be the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Trey Gowdy, who has a long career as a federal prosecutor, to go and do this. And then they, over a series of meetings, would come back with their notes and brief the rest of the committee members.
Did you or anyone on your committee coordinate in any way with President Trump or the administration on the release of this memo?
No, in fact,
we opened up this
in fact, we opened up an investigation into DOJ and FBI for FISA abuse and other matters last summer, in the summer of 17.
How about with President Trump's lawyers in any way?
No.
Outside conservative groups, just one today put out an ad that's targeting Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, saying that he needs to do his job or quit. It seemed like it was timed out, but did you work with any outside groups in the formulation of this memo?
No, I didn't. In fact, I personally like Rod Rosenstein. But look, the bottom line here is both Mr. Rosenstein, Mr. Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, and Director Wray have work to do. And they can't start doing their work to root out the problems if you don't admit first that you have a problem, and they've been unwilling to do that. But no, I don't work with outside groups on this.
The FBI, DOJ, other intel agencies all say there are material omissions in this memo. What did you leave out? Is there justification for the FBI behavior you detail in this memo that we have yet to learn?
Yeah, so we looked specifically at just FISA abuse. We wanted to keep sources and methods out. If you remember, 10 days ago, we were accused of a lot of things, especially that we were going to disclose our nation's top secrets. I think everybody's learned that was a total fallacy that was put out by the left and the mainstream media. We didn't disclose any secrets. Part of that is we had to take all of this information and reduce it down into a summary with just the pertinent facts about the FISA abuse. The only area that I am familiar with that we left out would be the history of Carter Page. I explained why we left this out to the director of the FBI. The director of FBI is well aware of my concerns about Mr. Page, and I don't believe that somebody like Mr. Page should be a target of the FBI, especially using salacious information paid for by a political campaign like this dossier was about Mr. Page, and then supplemented by a news story that was actually created by Christopher Steele himself, the author of the dossier. This is outrageous that this happened.
Will you vote to release the Democrats' memo?
Yeah, we will.
When is that going to happen?
But it has to go through the same process.
When do you think it'll be released?
Hard to say. I don't know yet. We haven't even. I've only read through it once. We're going to have to go through and scrub it again. And let's not forget, these are the same Democrats who never wanted to start an investigation. These are the same Democrats who blocked our subpoenas or tried to block our subpoenas back in August. They tried to block our ability to go and get the records from Fusion GPS that led to a lot of the discoveries in this investigation. So these are not honest actors. They know they're not being honest actors. And I get tired of playing whack-a-mole every day with the Democrats on this committee who never wanted to start this investigation in the first place.
Democrats are criticizing a lot, as you can imagine. I'm sure you've heard, but they're jumping on one particular part of the memo in particular. The number 4, the memo states that then Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, quote, testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. Democrats say he never said that, did he?
Yeah. I mean, it's a summation of a long interview, and that is definitely what he said. Not to mention, we have other witnesses who said very similar things. So the fact of the matter is, the main things that were used to go out and get this warrant was the dossier and the story that corroborated the dossier.
So why not put McCabe's quote in there or release the transcript?
Well, that would be a whole process that we'd have to go through. Actually, the quotes, I think, are pretty damning themselves. So I wouldn't mind doing that, but we would have to go through a whole process to release transcripts.
So you were getting to the point about how much of the FISA applications relied on the Steele dossier. What was the characteristic? You said they were integral, or it was integral?
Yeah, they wouldn't have received a warrant without the dossier. The dossier was presented to the court as if it was true. The court was not told that the Democrats actually paid for this. And just step back for a moment. This is not trying to go after some terrorist. This is about the FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign in the summer of 2016. That's what happened. And then they got a warrant on someone in the Trump campaign using opposition research paid for by the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's what this is about, and it's wrong, and it should never be done.
Is it true that the FBI led the FISA application with the dossier?
Yeah, most of the largest percentage of the entire application has to do with the dossier and then using the news story to corroborate the dossier.
There are Democrats on your committee talking on another channel today who insisted that the FISA court was told of the political nature of this information. Take a listen.
Is there anything inappropriate, do you think, about a partisan political document, the Steele dossier, being used in an application to surveil an associate of a presidential candidate, in this case Carter Page, especially if that fact is not disclosed in the application? Is that inherently wrong, do you think?
Jake, that fact was disclosed. It was disclosed to the FISA court that part of the evidence was from a politically motivated source.
True?
No. I mean, this is things I said earlier. I mean, these guys tell so many lies, you can't keep track of them.
That's not true.
No. The court was not made aware. And I would think that a judge, if the judge knew that, hey, we have an investigation of the Trump campaign, we're going after this Trump campaign advisor, and oh, by the way, Hillary Clinton's campaign paid for all this information. If that did happen, which it didn't, but if that court did know that, the judge would have to be, I think, considered very suspect. But I don't believe that happened at all.
The former FBI director, James Comey, I know you heard in John's piece, tweeted out that's it and went on to criticize this entire operation. Your thoughts on that tweet and Comey's reaction?
Well, Mr. Comey had a chance in January, February, March, April, I believe all the way till June, to come clean on who paid for the dossier. He was asked about it in January, and he said very clearly that he knew that Republicans had started the dossier, which was a lie. And then, when asked and probed further, well, who finished the dossier, he didn't know. Now, maybe he was lying, maybe he didn't know, but both seem to be a problem. So Mr. Comey's welcome to come back, tell us when exactly he learned that the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign paid for the dossier. He's welcome to come back and share that information. But I think the American people understand that the FBI should not go to secret courts using information that was paid for by the Democrats to open up investigations and get warrants on people of the other political party. That's the type of stuff that happens in banana republics.
Comey said in testimony that some of the dossier is unverified and salacious. Are there parts of the dossier that are true?
That Russia is a country and Carter Page is a person? I mean, other than that, I don't know anything.
So you don't know anything that's been corroborated by intel as a part of that dossier?
No, very little. And I think if you actually look at that dossier from the beginning, I don't know what FBI agent, what they were smoking, that would think that Carter Page, who's somebody who hasn't had a job for many years, who is obviously a Russian sympathizer, but that somehow the Russians, who actually said he was an idiot in court testimony, this was presented before the court, so Russian agent said that Carter Page was an idiot. And do you think that the Russians were going to offer him like a 19% share of the major oil company in Russia? I mean, this is crazy. And so when somebody first reads that dossier, I would think you would come away from that and think, okay, this is really this is wild stuff. In fact, it was probably, there's a good chance, let's not forget where the dossier came from. It came from Russians. So there's clear evidence of collusion with the Russians. It just happens to be with the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee that the news media fails to talk about or fails to even investigate.
Mr. Chairman, you know FISA is controversial to begin with. It was challenged for reauthorization, Section 702 recently. Members often look for reasons to vote against FISA, some of them civil liberties concerns. Wasn't the cart before the horse here? Was the memo withheld until FISA Section 702 was voted on by Congress?
No, so remember, 702 is different. It
Understood, it's different, but it still affects the overall authorization.
But we found no abuses within 702. I made that clear to my colleagues. Don't forget, the FBI and DOJ stonewalled us. We had to subpoena documents in August. We had several meetings all through the fall trying to get documents. Remember, at the beginning of January, people tend to forget this, when the FBI director and Mr. Rosenstein tried to do an end run around our committee and attempted to go to the speaker so that we would not hold them in contempt. That was not until just a few weeks ago.
Right.
So it took
Let me ask you about that. January
10th,
there was supposedly a meeting where Rosenstein comes up to you about document production, and it got fairly heated. Is that accurate?
Look, I mean, I've had several meetings with Mr. Rosenstein, and I like him personally. And I think that he can fix the problems over at DOJ, and we're willing to work with him.
So you don't think he should be fired from his job?
Well, look, that's not my decision. All I can say is that Mr. Rosenstein has a long career. But look, he's never really been in Washington, D.C.
But you know there are some members who are using this to question the Mueller investigation. Are you separating the two?
Well, I think what's happening is I think the mainstream media and the Democrats are tying this to the Mueller investigation because they're trying to perpetuate this nonsense of obstruction of justice because they've left the Russia collusion issue. They know there was no collusion. And you know, I've been saying this for a year now that there was no evidence of collusion.
Are there other
memos?
So
now you fast forward.
Are there other memos that are going to come out? Are there other memos? You said this was phase one.
Yeah, so this completes just the FISA abuse portion of our investigation. We are in the middle of what I call phase two of our investigation, which involves other departments, specifically the State Department and some of the involvement that they had in this. That investigation is ongoing, and we continue to work towards finding answers and asking the right questions to try to get to the bottom of what exactly the State Department was up to in terms of this Russian investigation.
Quickly, Mr. Chairman, some people have called you a Russian agent. Others have said you should be fired. The barbs today on cable TV were pretty amazing. Your thoughts in dealing with all of this in the job that you have?
Yeah, it's actually quite enjoyable because we have the underlying facts. We've been investigating this for a really long time. So you know that you're over the target when you're being attacked from all sides.
Mr. Chairman, we have to leave it there. The computer's going to cut us off. We appreciate the time, sir, and we will follow it up.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you. Up next, great jobs numbers. We'll look at the economy, and we'll analyze all of this with the panel. Just the P500 was down almost 4. The NASDAQ lost 3.5. Let's get some analysis now of what's happening. Here's Deirdre Bolton of Fox Business Network.
Investors went on a selling spree today. The prices of stocks, bonds, commodities all fell. The Dow logged its worst week in 2 years. On a day when there were so many signs of strength in the U.S. economy, the reaction was puzzling. U.S. employers hired more people in January than economists had forecast, adding 200,000 jobs, 20,000 more than expected. More workers in manufacturing and construction found jobs, thanks to global economic growth. Hiring managers in 2 other sectors, leisure and hospitality, and healthcare, were also busy hiring. In addition, the Trump administration's tax bill is also starting to deliver bigger paychecks.
My take-home pay is higher now, too. So I don't know, maybe Trump's making it happen. I don't know. We'll see.
I think there's a lot more room for improvement, and hopefully we'll see some of that. One paycheck, I'm not going to make a decision on one paycheck.
While some are skeptical, Labor Department data showed workers' wages went higher in January, too. Wage growth had been sluggish for almost a decade. It shot up quickly last month, increasing at the fastest rate since 2009. This rapid pace of wage growth is part of what was making some investors anxious. That anxiety showed up clearly in the markets. Investors get worried when Americans make more money due to inflation. When workers make more money, they can spend more on goods and services. Businesses anticipate that consumers will pay up, and they raise prices. Inflation is like calories. Some are necessary, but too much creates a glut. Also, when the Fed sees inflation, it raises rates, making all borrowing more expensive. While the markets sold off, some strategists are more sanguine about the bigger picture.
Stocks are down. We went more than 560 days without a decline of 5% or more, which was the longest stretch since World War II. And historically, following such long periods without declines, we ended up selling off an average of 12%.
So a contextual point, in the past 12 months, if you had money in the stock market, here are your returns. The Dow up 28%, S&P 500 21%, and the NASDAQ 28% higher, judging on the returns from the past 12 months alone. Brett?
That's the big picture. Deirdre, thank you. Up next, we'll take you to frigid Minnesota, look at extremely tight security ahead of the Super Bowl this weekend. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles, as counselors are on hand to help students deal with yesterday's shooting at a middle school near downtown L.A. 2 15-year-olds we told you were hit. Doctors say both will fully recover. A 12-year-old girl is in custody. Officials say they do not believe the shooting was intentional, though. Fox 2 in Detroit, as the father of 3 girls abused by former Team USA gymnast Dr. Larry Nassar tries to attack the defendant. It happened during the sentencing phase of Nassar's final trial. Randall Margraves had asked the judge for 5 minutes alone with Nassar. The judge refused. 2 of his daughters had just addressed the court to talk about their experiences. A few hours later, the father apologized and the judge offered no punishment. This is a live look at Miami from WSVN. One of the big stories there tonight says the current process to restore voting rights, which can take years. Teams are almost ready. The office pools are pretty much set. Did I already pay? I think I did, yep. The temperature, very cold. Security is very tight all around Minneapolis tonight as the countdown continues towards Sunday's Super Bowl between the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is in Bloomington, Minnesota at the Mall of America tonight.
Downtown Minneapolis has never seen this much security, with strategically parked National Guard Humvees and hundreds of soldiers joining roughly 3,000 local, state, and federal officers and agents, monitoring crowds and Super Bowl party venues ahead of Sunday's big game. Coordinating with more than 100 agencies, authorities spent the past 2 years developing a security plan with unique obstacles, since U.S. Bank Stadium sits in the heart of the city, an area vulnerable to vehicle or sniper attacks.
Here in downtown Minneapolis, it's surrounded by private buildings. There's a hospital a block away, so it creates a lot of challenges.
You get a 15-second countdown. The FBI has a massive mobile command post in town and 20 bomb techs with state-of-the-art equipment.
Now I know what's inside that box.
It looks like a pipe bomb.
Absolutely. So if I get a picture like that, that's going to generate a whole nother response.
And while the feds tell us there are no specific threats or signs of pregame terror chatter, the special agent in charge says their focus is sharp.
We're not just sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. We are, we're looking at social media. We're, we're contacting partners. We're collecting, we're looking at the 911 dispatch. We're looking at our own, our own holdings. I mean, all the possible ways that we could gather information that would, suggest that there could be something.
In the end, when folks fly out of here that Sunday night after they find out who won the game, that's all I want them thinking about is the game.
The other challenge is the weather, with a low of -7 today, not counting the wind chill, and a high predicted in the single digits for Sunday. Yes, the game is indoors, but fans will have to spend part of the time outside, and law enforcement will spend hours on these streets and will have to layer up to survive these frigid conditions. Brett?
Rick, thank you. In tonight's Whatever Happened To segment, the little Cuban boy whose mother died, bringing him to America, and was later taken by force back to the communist nation with the help of the U.S. government. His name? Elian Gonzalez. He now is a grown man, but many will always remember him as a symbol and a frightened little boy in a famous picture. I covered it back then. Tonight, correspondent Steve Harrigan has the story from Miami.
Thanksgiving 1999.
Do you know this boy?
Donato Dalrymple was fishing for mahi-mahi in heavy surf 3 miles off the coast of Fort Lauderdale.
I wasn't really thinking about fishing. I was over there looking at that inner tube, and as I seen my cousin pulling in the fish, I seen a hand move on that inner tube.
The hand belonged to Elian Gonzalez, tied to an inner tube by his mother. Perhaps her last act before perishing with 10 others trying to escape communist Cuba across the shark-infested Florida Straits. Elian's father, Juan Miguel Gonzalez, still in Cuba, asked for the boy back. But Miami relatives, including 2 great uncles, refused to send Elian back to the dictatorship his mother died trying to escape.
It was the ultimate sacrifice of a mother who wanted a better future of freedom for her son, and so it was something that obviously tugged on everybody's heart.
The custody battle electrified Cubans on both sides. In Miami's Little Havana, around-the-clock vigils were held around the Gonzalez family home.
Now the stalemate involving this little boy could possibly throw new immigration talks into jeopardy.
While in Havana, Cuba, Fidel Castro led daily protests demanding the boy's return to his father. The international drama dragged on for 7 months until the Clinton administration sent immigration agents armed for battle into the home. The fisherman who saved the boy now had him snatched from his arms. Castro made quick use of his victory. Elian's father, a waiter, was named a member of Cuba's National Assembly. Elian joined the Young Communist Union and became an engineer at a state-run factory. 18 years later, Fidel is gone from the scene. The U.S. Embassy in Havana is open for business, but the Elian case put a spotlight on the bitterness that has divided Cuban families and remains to this day.
Oh, I couldn't imagine something so beautiful could turn so ugly quick.
Dalrymple has never again seen the boy he saved and lost. In Miami, Steve Harrigan, Fox News.
Was it what you expected? Was it what you thought was going to happen? Did it meet the hype? We'll ask the panel about the memo.
Provided to us about the genesis of the investigation, which did not involve the dossier.
The only area that I am familiar with that we left out would be the history of Carter Page. I explained why we left this out to the director of the FBI. The director of FBI is well aware of my concerns about Mr. Page.
Well, a lot of focus on the memo released today, declassified, and the allegations of FISA abuse. Top Senate and House Democrats have issued a letter to the president saying, quote, "We are alarmed by reports that you may intend to use this misleading document as a pretext to fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein in an effort to corruptly influence or impede Special Counsel Bob Mueller's investigation. We write to inform you that we would consider such an unwarranted action as an attempt to obstruct justice in the Russia investigation. Firing Rod Rosenstein, DOJ leadership, or Bob Mueller could result in a constitutional crisis of the kind not seen since the Saturday Night Massacre." Reference to Watergate there. What about all of this today? Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today. And Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill. Byron.
Well, the first thing on the memo itself, there are two really big points, which is that one, it said that the memo was an essential part of this effort to get a wiretap warrant on Carter Page. And two, it said that Andrew McCabe, the number 2 at the FBI, said that without the dossier, there wouldn't have been a warrant.
Now, one clarification. It's not a quote in that part. And I asked Nunes about that.
Correct.
He said that there is a process to put out the transcript of McCabe, and they would have to go through that to get the transcript put out. But he says it was an integral part and that the FBI led with the dossier in the FISA applications.
And there's also the possibility that somebody else who was in a position to know also said that without the dossier, there wouldn't have been an application. So, I mean, those are two really, really big things. And on the other hand, then you look at what you've got now in the dossier, and then you look at what the FBI, the Justice Department, and Democrats have been saying in the last few days, that this would be an assault on the rule of law, that it would reveal American intelligence sources and methods. And you ask, does it really do that? And I think the answer is no.
Susan.
You know, it's interesting. I agree. The question about whether they could not have gotten a FISA warrant without the dossier, I think that's an important point. It's one that's under dispute between the two parties. It's a knowable fact about whether he said that or not, and so I'm hoping that we will know what he actually said before the committee and what the truth was on that. But I actually think the most important thing about this report out today is whether it is in fact used for additional purposes. For instance, the president's tweet this morning, the president's comments that you just aired indicate that he would like to fire some people as a result of this. And if he does that, that seems to me it could be extremely consequential.
Yeah. Matt, listen, the hyperbole on both sides has at times gone off the deep end. Leading up to this, some congressmen were hyping this up as the moment of, the biggest thing. Others were too, commentators and others. On the Democratic side, they were so concerned about sources and methods and what this would do to the institution. But where's the ground truth here?
So what is it, Brett? Is it going to destroy our national security if this document is released? And then the document is released and it's called a nothing burger. There's nothing in it. It's not very important. I think the Democrats who have been critical of Devin Nunes need to pick a lane. And I think it's important. I think you're right. There has been hyperbole. And the one thing I would say, Brett, is this is not the breaking this is not going to break the back of those folks who used the federal government to try to go after a political opponent. This is one step. We're going to learn more. And I think it's very important to take a breath and to take a step back and say, because a lot of conservatives don't like FISA, they don't like the government having this kind of authority, they don't like the government spying on Americans. Are we okay with one administration using these powers to go after their political opponents? I think that is very scary.
But there were two Trump-appointed deputy attorneys general that continued the FISA surveillance.
No, that's exactly right.
And what does that tell you?
I think it tells you that they might, the current one might have some job security issues, number one. And I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you read the FISA memo, it is alarming that this was done clearly to advantage the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. Why would they want to continue it?
And there's a couple of things that...
And even the Russians said Carter Page was an idiot. They didn't even want to use him as a spy.
A couple of things that jump out. Memo number one graphic, September 2016, Christopher Steele admitted to then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, who his wife worked for Fusion GPS, who put this all together, his feelings against then candidate Trump when Steele said, quote, he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. Byron.
I think that part, his personal animus toward Trump, is less important than the fact that the dossier was actually an Oppo research product funded by the Democrats. But I do think maybe one of the most beneficial effects we are seeing right now is that the release of this memo has created a lot of momentum for the release of more stuff. Now, what did McCabe tell the committee? We want to see the McCabe interview. What's really in the FISA application? We want to see that too. So I think that's a good thing. And what's in the Democrats' letter? We need to see more rather than less.
Quickly, Susan, overlooked, I think, in that end of that interview, Nunes said more is coming. There will be other memos.
Yeah,
this is phase one, just focused on FISA. And two, there are rumblings up on Capitol Hill that there will be an official call for another special counsel.
Yeah. You know, but to Matt's point, I think what's interesting is not the partisan divide on this, which is predictable. It's the divide within the Trump administration between the FBI and the Justice Department on one side and the White House on the other side on whether it was proper to release this report. And that does not have the partisan tinge that the divide between Democrats and Republicans have.
All right, next up, a very lightning round on Friday. Immigration, economy, winners and losers.